Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next fundamental demo. We have some quite exciting news and updates and improvements that we want to share with you. So let's get started right away. This is the agenda for today. You can guys hear me and you see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes. So a little update from the cross-library part. Then we're gonna jump and give an update from accept the view from the other libraries, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions and answers. Cross-library. Well, the biggest thing that happened is that we have approved official names as part of our branding. So now the core name is Fundamental Library. We can use it officially, and then the 4 libraries are named Fundamental Library Styles, which is corresponds to the GitHub repository Fundamental Styles. Fundamental NGX is named Fundamental Library for Angular. Fundamental React, the formal name is Fundamental Library for React, and Fundamental Vue is Fundamental Library for Vue. Yeah, that's pretty much the cross libraries, and we'll jump straight to the demos and the libraries itself. So first it's going to be Fundamental Library Styles. Maybe first update from Jenna, and then some demo.
Sure. So we've done a ton of work on self-contained styles, and when we say that, we mean we want you to be able to take a button from Fundamental Vue, Fundamental Angular, Fundamental React, throw it on the page, and not have styles leak out and affect any other button on your page. So we don't use element selectors anymore. Everything is class-based, no attributes. So we've made a ton of progress on that, and I think we're mostly there, save a few bugs every now and then. We've done a steady stream of improvements and bug fixes for the styles after importing them into the implementation libraries. By bringing them in, it exposed some issues with, because we self-contained each element or each component by itself, when you put them together, occasionally we had clashes. So we've made a lot of progress on that. And then we improved the visual regression testing suite. It's now way more automated and comprehensive, with the caveat that it has slowed down our CI builds. So that'll be a place of improvement for the future, but it's worth it to have them a little slower to have way more robust testing at the moment. So and I'll pass off to Ina.
Yeah, so I'll stop sharing, I guess.
Yes. Do you see my screen and the product switch?
Yes.
Okay. So lastly, we added the product switch component, which provides access to all products or AOBs. It shows one level of navigation. Product switch is part of the shell bar and consists of 2 elements. Control element, the button that you see here in the shell bar with the grid icon. And this button is used to open and close the product switch body. The body contains our products, which are represented by an avatar that can be an icon or an image, a title, and an optional subtitle. Depending on the number of products in the product switch, we can have 2 layouts in desktop. The one you see now is a 4-column layout used when we have more than 6 products. For less than 6 products, we have the 3-column layout, which is achieved by adding a modifier class FD product switch body called 3. For small screens, the product switch transforms to a list. This is how it looks like. And the product switch has drag and drop capabilities, which we implemented in Fundamental NGX. They're used to personalize the product switch by allowing the user to rearrange the product items. Oh, if you open the product switch, so basically you can drag and drop items, the home element has a fixed position and it's always the first element and cannot be dragged. We expose a property called drag and drop enable. And if you set it to false, you can basically disable any other element, not just the home element. But the home element is always the first element and you cannot put anything before it. You can put it after, but not before. For the fundamental NGX, we're using the Angular CDK drag and drop. And the next element I will show in fundamental styles is the site navigation, which is used to display navigation structures with 2 or more levels. It contains links that change the content in the main area. The site navigation consists of 2 containers, the main navigation section, which is top aligned, and the utility section, which is bottom aligned. Basically, they are separated by this line here. The one that I'm showing now is a site navigation with 1 level, text only, and cozy mode. If you want to have a site navigation with icons, you can achieve it by just adding icons in the link element. Then site navigation can have multiple levels. The recommended number of levels is 2, but if you need more, you can add a 3rd level, for example. And you can also have group headers and the mix of elements with and without icons, which is also not recommended, but if you want, you can achieve it. You can have compact mode, which is the mode used on devices operated by mouse and keyboard. And then the site navigation with icons in condensed state. This triangle here indicates that there are sub-items or 2nd and 3rd levels. And the last example is condensed state and compact mode. You can apply 2 of these states per device content. It means like you can have a combination of expanded condensed, expanded off canvas, or condensed and off canvas. And that's it.
Thank you, Ina. So I'll take the share back. Meanwhile, it's worth also mentioning that the other thing we started doing is adopting the theming parameters from the SAP UI theme designer. So the components that Ina showed, they're already using the colors, not only the colors, but the parameters from the theme designer. So means if you bring a new theme for the components that you saw and few others, basically you're gonna get the covers for the specific theme. So let's say if they create dark theme, which is gonna be soon, and if you bring the CSS variables assigned to the colors, this will switch to the dark theme or high contrast black or high contrast white. And then Ina presented also the NGX implementation since it's related to the implementation style. So we'll skip this in there. Next topic is fundamental library for React. And back to Jenna.
Sure. So we started with implementing the fundamental styles as a hard dependency instead of a peer dependency, so that consumers don't need to keep track of what fundamental styles version they should be on, especially because we're shipping a lot of things really quickly in there and there's a ton of RCs and it was just getting confusing. So we are now importing all of the styles directly into the components using a with styles higher order component. And what that does is it wraps each component and then it enables you to disable the styles, add a custom style sheet, or allow the fundamental styles compiled CSS file to be imported into the component. So now users of Fundamental React can be completely ignorant of what's happening in fundamental styles, because that should all be handled by the developers on Fundamental React. We also changed our focus trap library. It was causing problems when used in a portal, like if you used a modal and had something like a drop down inside of the modal. So we had an outside contributor actually find this bug for us and fix it. And we switched to the React focus lock library. We also removed the React inline elements transform. That was working locally for all of us, but it turns out when consumers were using it, it was causing React keys warning. So we got that out of there without any other problems. And then the other major thing we've done is a overhaul of our input group component. Previously, it was all prop based and there was kind of like a lot of magic going on. You would just say, hey, I want it to kind of look like this, and it would magic itself into existence. Now we've actually taken a lot of that out, and you have to supply the children yourself. Like if you want it to have a form control and an add-on button, you have to supply those now. But we did that, it sounds a little backwards, but we did that because we want to use it for our other components, so it's more composable and customizable. So a lot of this work was actually groundwork for the date picker that we're going to start. We know we have a bunch of issues open on that, and we're going to start reworking it. There'll be possibly markup changes, which will go through fundamental styles first for accessibility reasons. And then we're going to start transitioning into using Moment.js for time logic handling, because that's the gold standard for JavaScript libraries now. So, and I can share, if you'd like a little demo.
You should be able to share now.
So here's our input group now. It should look the exact same. The only difference is now you, as I was saying, you pass your children in, like input group add-on. We've created add-on buttons. The form input is just another component. We have icons. You can have a button. So you would just put it together like this. So that's kind of a big deviation, and that was one of our major breaking changes. And then with the with styles higher order component that I was talking about, you can see, so the styles this is just importing an action bar. The styles just come with it. We also made it so you can disable the styles if necessary. We're going to need this at SAP Concur to be able to skin it to match our current component library before we can transition to into Fiori 3. Or you can add a custom style sheet, which I chose a pink background. So yeah, so this is all, it seems really easy at first, but there was a lot of infrastructure work that went into this, and it should set us up for the future for everything to go much faster and easier. And unless there's any questions on that, I think we can probably go to Angular.
Yes, thank you so much. Let me go back to the presentation. So some updates on the fundamental library for Angular. In the last couple of weeks, maybe months, we decided to create two parallel packages. Basically the one that you've been using or you wanted to use now, instead of fundamental NGX, it's called under the namespace of the organization at fundamental NGX/core. And the other one, it's the fundamental NGX at /platform. And Frank is going to talk a little bit more about this, and then he's going to give a little bit overview why we decided to go with that. But before going there, we can do quick updates from the NGX core. And before going into the demos and these components or the application, I want to point out another thing. So maybe I can go to my browser. And so you see, if I go to NPM, not this one, but at NGX core, you will see the versioning. So we have version 0.12, and also you see another one, 0.11. So at the moment we support two versions. The main reason is that we are preparing our library also for Angular 9, but at the same time, Angular 7 and Angular 8 are still supported. So for that reason, 0.11, it's still active and it's being compiled with Angular 7. 0.12, it's already compiled with Angular 8. So means if your application and you're using Angular 8, you have two choices: to use the previous package 0.11 version or 0.12. If your application compiled with Angular 7, then your choice will be, you know, library compiled with 7, which is 0.11. That's why I'm raising it, because, you know, Angular is preparing for, you know, also bigger change related with the IV, but that is going to happen later on in either Angular 9 or later on. I think that's about the package. I'll go back to, since, you know, I'm presenting, I'll quickly present you the notification. So I can go to fundamental styles first, and what the notification looks like. Basically, it's similar like alert, but in this case, it's not render in the middle, it's more render on the top right corner. And then it looks like a model pretty much, but then you have actions as part of the notification. And you have a content as a template. And then, you know, the status of the notification has the color on the left side. Then you can have the different types of notifications. The other thing is that you can group notifications under one kind of a block. And then when you group them, you can have the approve and reject all, or you can handle them basically individually as well, right? This is in terms of look, and then this is the right to left support. So I'll go back to the NGX as I wanted to show you a little bit more. So this is my NGX, and I want to put it to full screen. I'll go to notification center. So let me move this a little bit down. When you open notification, this is inline basically. So we also support, you can create notification inline the content, right, as part of the content, and you can have, you know, different variants. So you can approve, you can even dismiss, right? The other one is you can open them as part of, you know, on the right top corner, which is like, you know, the alert, you can open them in overlay mode, right? So I'll close some. Was it this one with the groups? No, yeah, the grouping basically, we can add multiple, right? And then I can start, let me close some of those. I can reject some, or I can approve all of them at the same time. And then we have different variants, you know, with different data that is being passed as well. And you can see the code and what you need to pass in order to get this done. But that's pretty much it for that. And if I go back to the presentation, the next is going to be, should we go with Stack Blitz and Demo App first, or we go with the product? Oh, I think we presented Product Switch, right? So then in this case, we're going to go to Stefano, right?
Yeah, so we'll actually go with the demo app first.
Sure.
So let's share my screen. Second.
And while he's starting sharing, you know, the other thing that we did also in parallel, similar to fundamental library for React, is we adopted the fundamental styles with a self-contained. So we did quite some refactoring. So each component, basically it's importing the style for the respective component. It doesn't, you don't need to take the whole library anymore. It comes per component.
All right. So basically what I've done and what we've done is we've put together a demo app, and what this demo app is going to do is it's going to display all of our components. Instead of seeing them individually, you'll actually see them all working together. So in this case, we had two sections. We just had a contracts of products, and this included a filter with a drop down. It was a select list, and as you could see, it could filter out the components. Another thing that, so that shows that. Then we also have our table that's shown here with the drag and drop. There's that feature that showed. So as we add different components to our library, or if there's anything adjusted to our components, if you want to see how they can work together, you could just check out our demo app, and that's going to show you how each component can work together instead of individually. But if you do want to see them individually, and how to exactly modify the component, let's say you want to use it yourself, one of the really good things we have that we've added is a stack blitz. So in case, what it does is it shows the code in real time with the server here. Just let it load. So in this case, I'm gonna open you up 3 types. There's the alert to start off. So a simple component, it's gonna display all the CSS and everything. And if you want to, for example, change the code yourself, you can do that. So let's just say you wanted to say required, for example. Save it there, reload it, and as you can see, it's going to show you in real time exactly what gets done to your components as you adjust the HTML. You'll also have a style sheet in case you want to adjust anything here and see how that works, how that can affect it, and you have your TypeScript file. So the TypeScript file is going to actually be more useful in other cases. For example, here you have a lot of files, right? A lot of TypeScript files, so you'll be able to see them all over here, and you'll be able to adjust each file. So here we go. So in this case, it just opens other components for this alert one, but you'll be able to see how they work. If you want to change anything, you can. For example, there should be one. Okay, here, so for example, if you wanted to change the method and change the string inside, so this alert, let's just say you want it to be whatever, you can save that, and I think that's the component one. No, that would be, yeah, here you go. So that one would get applied here. So they're just demonstrations, and you'll be able to fiddle around yourself and see how the code works. If you think there'll be an error or whatever, or if there's even the smallest little bug, you can also save it, send it to us, and we'll report the issue as soon as we can. So that's all on our end for the demo and the stacklet.
So basically, as Stefano showed, is all of our demo examples that you see on the documentation page are being can be exported in StackBlitz. So if you want to play around, use a certain component, especially more complicated than just an alert, you can click the button next to it, play. If you find an issue, this is also an easy way you can save the StackBlitz, file an issue in our GitHub, and then we can take a look and even, debug it, offer a solution or bug fix it, right? That's pretty much from the fundamental library for Angular core. And we're gonna jump to the next exciting thing. So we decided to create another package, Fundamental NGX platform, where Frank and his group, they join us in this initiative. And I'll hand it over to Frank. Frank, do you want me to stop sharing and you can share, or I can keep the presentation for now?
Yeah, you can keep probably presentation for now, and I can just tell you move next. That would be easier.
Okay. Go ahead.
So as everybody knows, all of a sudden inside Angular NGX, there was a new package called platform, right? And the question is why we really did it, why we actually needed new library. The first, that we wanted to actually move the fundamentals NGX into true Git monorepo, meaning that we can actually support multi-lib support and multi-app support. Because if you actually use standard Angular CLI, they don't really give it to you. But if you actually use some other tools from a company called Norval, that it can actually turn your GitHub repo into really well-structured folders where you have app folder and you have lib folder. And then you have certain extensibility and certain way how you can actually keep adding libraries. And of course, you have several type of libraries. you have those which are publishable to the npm, and those which are shareable, which is shared by those libraries which you actually create. And the good things about this is that just like you can look at the Angular or any other library where Angular has core, compiler, forms, and so on, we need to keep creating certain things because you don't want to actually stack everything into one single library. And the reason why we actually created platform in the first place was we need certain abstraction. So if you can probably move to the next slide, is when you work on application level, where you are asked to develop some business application, you don't have so much time actually to go and play around and do things, because we believe that sometimes less is even more, and you need to actually give the application developer a little bit less or narrow scope what he can do with libraries so he can be more productive. Of course, it doesn't mean that you cannot give him certain extensibility inside your components as well, right? But he needs to have single way how to assemble things. And every single team has different skill set. And we agree with this, right? Because you can have a guy who is like super CSS guru who can actually align certain things in the second, and you can have another guy who would be struggling to align element in the middle of the page for 2 days, right? And this is one of the reasons why we try to hide, or the main goal is to really try to hide as much as HTML or CSS interaction as possible, because you need to have high-level elements, and the application developer would be there just to keep assembling different kinds of pages in application. If you can move to the next slide. So that's why we can say that platform, and of course, it's built on top of core. And the idea behind this is to extend existing functionality for some new features that we actually gather from real enterprise application what we have. One of the major application on our side is guided buying that everybody probably use in SAP to purchase things. And they had the most requirements. And most of these requirements falls already into core, and we say it doesn't make sense to extend anything outside of platform or into the platform. Let's enhance existing core component. And some of them requires certain abstraction. So let's take, for example, a typical component called dropdown, right? In the fundamentals dropdown, we assembled, it's a component, right? But on the other side, we assemble a dropdown, and we are actually showing developers the dropdown options that he needs to actually iterate through those, and so on, so on. So we're actually exposing certain implementation details and maybe a little complexity to the application developers. The idea on our side or platform side is we need to hide as much as possible, because developer is provided only with the element. Let's call it platform dropdown, and the only things he needs to pass is a list of options, and whatever is done internally he should not worry about, right? And we should be able to support not only list of values, we should be also able to support some reactive streams, right? Because not everybody or not every single use case is ideal just to pass some simple list of values or array of values. You want to actually pass some observable where you can actually push different values as you type, right? And so we try to have certain abstraction on top of those components to enhance it in certain way. And one of the major goals in the beginning was really our components needs to be instantiable. And what it means is that instantiable in programmatic way, because as I will show you in the next demo part is we have something called meta UI, rule-driven development, or a rule-driven way how we can actually assemble a user interface. And for this, we need to have programmatic way how to instantiate and place components on the page. And when we have, for example, directives, unfortunately, Angular doesn't allow us to do anything with this. But if you have component, that is self-contained with all the internal things, and you are allowed just to pass bindings and listen for certain outputs. You can instantiate them on the fly and place them on the page. And when we are with this library subject, we should not stay or they should not be only targeted to the UI, because if you want to provide application developer really full framework, we should be actually focused on some other areas we are actually dealing with on daily basis. And one of the bigger one is application state or state management, right? Because everybody is trying to solve exactly the same problem over and over, how to fetch the data and how do I store them? How do I actually query the data for certain view, right? And so on. And these things should be part of fundamentals as well. I'm not sure whether they should be platform or there should be some additional library, because every time you add something additional to existing library, people will have to use it, or you download the whole package. But if you actually make it as an extra library, people can decide whether they want it or not, right? So this granularity is already built in Angular CLI, and we are just using it. And that's pretty much what platform is and why we have it. And maybe now, anybody has any questions? Looks like.
Do you want me to stop sharing? Maybe the questions will come after your demo.
Okay.
Should I stop sharing?
Yeah, let's stop share. And what I'm trying to show you now, let me check. This is this one. You know, I have this just new iPad Pro, and I'm just testing this new feature where you can just connect and extend the display with your iPad. It's pretty cool. If anybody try your Catalina and have iPad next to it, and you can just really extend the display, and it's like super useful when you're actually outside of your monitors and you can actually have two displays.
Nice.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. We see Safari.
Oh, okay, good. And now I will switch to my Keynote. This is another thing. So, you know, when you have presentation in Keynote and you try to share these things over the Skype for Business, it doesn't work. And hopefully it will work over here. So which part you see right now?
We see with the text and the notes.
Okay, so I need to switch this. Let me check. You want to see this part. You want to see this part. And
now we see PowerPoint.
Excellent.
Yes, now we see it.
Yeah, I haven't figured out how to position those things. So what I'm going to tell you today, something that I'm trying to, for last a few months, evangelize on every single meetup and share with not only with SAP community, but also with Angular community. And luckily, this talk will be part of the next talks in NG Atlanta on one of the Angular conference. And they want to select this talk also, not this specific talk, but something similar on DCOM. And what I'm going to tell you today, this is standard presentation that I try to share with everybody. And maybe the title is pretty sophisticated, but the only things that I'm trying to say is that I will show you today different ways how UI can be built in more efficient way with way less code, using rules or rule engine that can sit on the front-end side with really small footprint that can make your life a little easier. And today, before we move into actual demo, we will try to see some motivation behind it, where we are coming from, what we are trying to solve. And once we understand this, we will move into a few set of features which I actually picked that I think they are most significant for this framework. And all this is basically working with Angular. Even the rule engine is the way I implemented inside TypeScript is pretty generic, and the future plan is really actually to use it in React, maybe UI5 and some other framework as well. And at the end, we will have demo, or actually 2 demos. And I think that's pretty much it. And we can actually move to the next slide. As you know, we all work in the bigger companies, and big company has usually a lot of big departments, and those departments has different teams, and those teams building different kinds of applications. And what it means for us, it means a lot of code. And when you have a lot of code, somebody needs to do maintenance on top of it. And if you do some enhancements on the lower level, you most likely need to update everything. And this probably actually creates tons of different directions. So there's a lot of issues. And the way we try to achieve or improve this, we try to have some reusable library. Let's say just like Fundamentals and GX. Because SAP is great that we're actually using different kinds of technology, even within the team, and we don't talk to each other at all. And hopefully, once we have Fundamentals and GX, and people will stop building their own libraries over and over and over and try to use only one, we can actually improve this problem. But even when we have this library, can we even solve this problem at all to actually minimize the number of code we write? I don't think so, because if we have some reusable set of libraries that we can use, let's say, to build 2 kinds of application. Here I have invoice sync system and some CR system. But to build those 2 systems using, let's say, some reusable set of components, we still need to write a lot of code. And when you look at this example, for example, let's say I'm building hypothetical a page where I want to show user details. And you can see how many lines of code I have to actually write just to show 4 fields, right? And usually our enterprise object doesn't actually end up having only 4 fields. We have 250 fields. Like, how do you show them? Because the code will be pretty messy. So having a reusable library doesn't solve this issue at all. Because if you imagine, like, if I go in the first example, let's say invoicing system, we have several entities, right? We can actually count. We have invoice, we have purchase order, we have receipts, we have user permissions, and oops, no, I was too fast. And I can easily count 10 different enterprise entities for invoicing system, right? And then I can go to CRM system, which is, I don't know, we can have task, project, and so on. And we can count another set of maybe 10 entities that I need to represent on the UI. What does it mean for a developer? That I need to build views for those entities. And we are not only viewing those objects, we need to also edit those objects. And when we are editing those objects, we are also creating these objects. And in most of the cases, create use case or create view is not exactly the same just like edit view. So at minimum, we have 3 views per our entity. And if I have 10 enterprise entities per, let's say, 1 example, it means a lot of code. It means I have to write a lot of views. So that's why the main motivation behind it is to try to minimize the number of lines of code and try to generate everything on the fly for the user. So we can say that everything starts and ends, and it's always like this, with our specific model class, our entity, for which we try to assemble our UI. And whether we're building things and showing purchasing system and try to render purchase order or invoice, this is exactly the same thing whether I'm building completely something else. Because with traditional approach, we try to assemble and use those components and lay out everything manually. And this is something we try to avoid. So that's why what we try to show you is something we call meta UI, or rule-driven user interface, which is set of APIs and minimum set of components that can take your model. In this case, this is your domain objects, and metadata describing this model. This is our rules that we call object style sheet or OSS rules. They are really similar, just like CSS rules, to dynamically derive fully functional user interface for you without forcing you or letting you assemble or lay out every single field manually for every single use case. So it means for your entities, all of a sudden, instead of actually writing 3 views or 5 views, you will actually only have 1 view, right? And when we look at some of the features that we have, and as I said at the beginning, I just pick only a few. Since we try to declare everything only once, we try to follow the DRY principle, don't repeat yourself. And one of the most critical part on enterprise application is customization, because every single customer, at least in our case, have different requirements, and every single country has different requirements. And when we're actually building user interface to present certain number of fields, every single customer might want to customize this. So you need a framework with really rich customization capabilities. And as I already said, since this is really similar, just like CSS, at least those OSS rules, and this was really heavily motivated by CSS. What it means is that our rules are additive, meaning more common rules can be overwritten by more specific rules. This gives you really great flexibility how you can actually adjust your user interface for different use cases or user scenarios. And of course, to make this more applicable for others, it cannot stay or be tied to only one library. Because initially, when we wrote this framework, everything was tied into something called PrimeNG, because at that time, that was really the most functional and more powerful Angular library implementation out there, with most rich set of components that you can use. And of course, we try to tie it together. And once we try to present this to outside community, they didn't really care about PrimeNG, because everybody has their own set of components. So we were basically forced to break it apart, the rule engine and the UI part. And now you can actually easily plug in your UI framework or your UI library. And I already mentioned this part while talking about those examples. Every single UI must support different kinds of modes, because this is how we treat or how we actually work with the different entities. So we differentiate between edit, create view, and list view, search view, you can name it. And for every single view, you can actually have different variation of UI. And what it would be on enterprise level if we would not be able to support certain conditions or some advanced enterprise statement that are evaluated on the fly, such an expression that you can actually say, hey, can you make this field visible for this user and not for that user? And can you validate this differently for this different group of people or customer than the other one? And you can actually tie this into different editability condition and so on. But to understand this better, let me give you a quick demo. And since we don't want to wait for some npm install to finish, I just have these few set of these 3 commands that I usually run before the presentation, where I create a brand new Angular application. I add, using Angular schematics, support for Angular rules, and I just create some detail page that we will work through the demo. And let me close this. Let me move to the next screen. Can you see my IDE?
No, we see the PowerPoint.
Oh, you see the PowerPoint, I see. So let me again. And I was thinking how great it is to, let me switch to desktop 1. now you should be able to see my code, right?
Yes,
Oh, cool.
we see the web store.
Yes. Perfect. Okay, so once I run those commands, why is this one here? Go away. So once I run this 3 commands, the regular Angular application was generated. And just like you know, there's nothing fancy, it's just standard. We have Angular JSON in there. We have main Angular component HTML. But what is different is that I have generated this member details page that we will work through the demo. And the main app component just contains this one element that actually shows this one view page. And for simplicity, I will actually work through this single page that I will actually work with one entity that I call a member. And since we're actually following, well, domain-driven development, that we actually differentiate between entities and values. This is the entity because entity usually have certain identity in the database. And for simplicity, our controller just instantiate this member object. And we will have our rules. We don't have to worry right now about too much those rules. This is not really important. And here we will see our template for the member details. And as you see, I have only 3 lines. And we will explain everything in the next few slides, or I will explain everything in a few slides. But the only things you need to remember right now is that I'm telling that framework, hey, can you render this object for me for operation, edit, and layout inspect? And I don't take care of anything else. And whatever you find along your evaluation of rules and rendering, include whatever you can, right? And when I run this, and I already ran this beforehand, I'm not sure whether it's super slow. I'm still sharing, right?
Yes, and we see your web store.
Okay, good, because I just click on something. Now it's a little bit faster and all those numbers I had here, screen number 1, screen number 2 are gone, good. And when I execute this, what will happen is that you will see this page rendered, and let me refresh whether my ngserf, and of course, member details is generated with just 3 lines of HTML template code. And I didn't really have to do anything, but to show you more is that I don't really like the structure here, because usually what I like to do is maybe the bio, like user description, I want to move at the bottom. I don't want to have it as a simple text input field. I would like to have it, make it text area, and maybe add a few properties to my favorite IDE because it's dot brown. And what I see without doing nothing, it recognizes the number field. So it's correctly picked the right component, just like the calendar, the date picker. Now, what I want to do is that I want to just do a few things. And we will actually go through the rule after this demo. But so far you need to remember, and you're supposed to read it just like you would read a regular CSS file, because we have selectors and we have properties. And those properties basically define exactly the same thing, just like we define properties in our CSS file or CSS files, where somebody who understands those properties knows how to treat them and know how to actually render our HTML. So when I actually go back and refresh the screen, you will see 2 things. That we moved our bio at the bottom. Now we have multi-select here because we provided some values here. And we have our values in our dropdown now. And the only things I did is that I said, hey, for a field called bio, I want to apply a trait long text. You can actually understand this trait as a mixin because, or trait as a features, you have it, for example, in C#, but since we want to actually stay in UI world, mixing is probably the best example. And I can actually apply as many traits as I want to add additional behavior. And for favorite, I want to actually display it as a select. And these are my list of choices. I can actually write them like this, or I can actually refer to some service and retrieve some data. And for the interest, I apply this set of choices, motorcycle, space, and family. And since interest is defined as a array, I don't need to specify what type of component I want this as it to be rendered because it automatically picks a multi-select. And you will see everything's rendered. And when I look at my HTML code, I haven't touched anything. But what will happen if I want to view the same thing in the read-only mode? Do I need to do something? No, because I just switch the property that I want to view these things in read-only mode. Somewhere else, rules are recalculated, and my view is in read-only mode, right? And I don't have to do much. But what I want to do now is that, let's say we have so many fields right now, even we have only a few, but I would like to reorganize all this into certain region because I feel that we can actually move a few fields to the right side, have two column layout, and maybe put bio and leave it at the bottom, and the page will be well structured. But for this, what I did is, since I want to remember my rule, so I will just copy and paste this one. And you can see, I just added some additional selector where I just say, hey, for member and this list of fields, move them to the left, and this set of fields, move them to the right. For bio, move it to the bottom. And as I said, just let's look at it as a set of selectors and properties, nothing else. And when I go into the page, I can see that everything is nicely organized. I have two column layout, everything. This one is at the bottom. And if I go into the, what is it, edit mode, and things will recompile. And it's pretty good. Okay, I can type things. Okay, good. So let's move back to the presentation because I want to switch again my desktop. And I will go into Keynote.
We see PowerPoint.
Excellent. So
now we see it.
So you just see how easy it was to generate UI out of nothing. I use only a few rules, and I haven't changed pretty much anything on the template side. But to understand this better, I want to review with you certain really simple CSS example because you need to understand really like where these OSS rules are coming from. And I said at the beginning that we are heavily motivated by CSS, and I want to show you why. So when you look at this example, where on the left side we have div with class shape and we have rules, right? It looks pretty straightforward, but we need to understand how to read this example because when you look at this from the DOM level point of view or somebody who is responsible for parsing this, then I have class shape which is within the context of div, and this div is within the context of body, right? And I can have generic rules is that if somebody tries to apply class shape, use this three set of properties, and this one is rendered. But if I'm on similar device, I want to render something else. So we're actually using our cascading rules, cascading style sheets that are really additive, where since I actually move into smaller device, the more specific rules actually override whatever is on the top level. And as you know, in CSS, just like in HTML on DOM level, those things can be nested because we can have class called shape, under inside this div I can have another set of elements, and those will apply only if something is matched. And we have always selectors and we have always properties. And when our browser is trying to actually read all this, read all the CSS and HTML selector and try to parse everything, he's trying to create certain context for us. And the context contains all different kinds of information, browser width, height, so we can actually use them in the CSS selectors, right? And Meta UI world, we are kind of one step ahead. We create context ourselves. We don't ask browser to create context, but in this case, we say, what is the current class? What is the current operation? What is the current layout? And let rule engine to do its own thing, because on the right side, we have our rules. And just like in the first case, we can have generic rules that we can say, hey, if operation is added, set this property visible to, and somebody else knows how to read this property and do some rendering. Or we can have nested rules where you can say, hey, if you actually render class user, and at the same time you are in operation edit, and you are also rendering a field social security number, make this false, right? We can have different variation of rules. Rules by itself are really similar to CSS, and you should really read it that way. Just like on the left side, we have CSS rules, even it's more sassy, where we say dot shape means class equals. It's exactly the same things like OSS, because we are just more descriptive and we just need to provide a little bit more information. But again, we have selectors in here which are nested, class equals shape, class equals labels, and we can have hash something that means ID equals, right? But on OSS side, it's completely the same, but we just have a few specific keywords to work with our specific use case to work with domain objects. So we have class equals users, fields equals social security number, and we cascade those styles or those selectors, and we have properties underneath them. We can write those rules in different kinds of way. All these things can be nested, as you see on the left side. We can write everything in line, just like in pure CSS, or we can have combination of both. Again, and I will try to repeat this several times, we have selectors and properties. Don't try to search anything extra behind it. And when we try to define our properties, those properties can have different set of values or type of values. We can have booleans, we can have strings, we can have arrays, we can have maps, and we can have expression. By the way, these expressions are evaluated using eval function, so we can actually have any kinds of expression that is JavaScript compatible. And of course, and we already used this in our example at the beginning, to make things easier for developer, we can actually aggregate certain functionality into something called trade. And trade for you equals mixins. And we can actually have as much as reusability as we can. And we can actually apply to certain selector field as many trade as we can to actually edit some additional behavior. Because if you imagine that if you really searching for some reusability, you try to actually really accumulate certain common features into something that we can actually reuse everywhere. And we don't want to actually develop things just like on the right side, you see that we want to actually create a rule for a specific field that if you are editable, then use this specific component and make sure once we are editing and creating, make the asterisk next to a field because we want to tell user that this field is required and create some validity condition. We don't want to do that because we want to define only once, create a trait, which is just another set of rules, and then apply this trait everywhere. And of course, this is pretty much normal on enterprise level that not always we try to render a field that exist on the domain object or on the database. Sometimes you want to render some made up fields, some ad hoc fields, some calculated fields. And for this, we can have this add, where you can actually declare field. In this case, we are declaring field, let's say call it full name, that contains from different kinds of values, right? And this field doesn't even need to exist on the entity itself. It can be made up. You can imagine this, that I'm rendering an invoice, for example, and the only things I have stored in the database is my amount. But depending on the country, I can actually calculate dynamically what is the amount along with the VAT, right? Now, I will actually jump into the next demo because I want to show you some more additional advanced features that Meta UI can do. Let me again close this and share desktop 1. Jump into my IDE. Where are you? Okay. So right now we just end up moving fields around to better organize the content. What I want to do now, because we'll be switching and I will try to show you different way how the content looks in the read-only view and maybe create view and editable view. What I want to do right now, I want to just a little bit modify this UI and put a few buttons so I don't have to actually change this menu all the time. So, but since I want to be fast, so I have this little template that I will apply. As you see, the only things I added these 3 buttons, and the operation is not anymore a hard-coded field. It's my operation field that I need to enable here. And what it does, when I compile this, I hope there's no error. Check. It's okay. And when I compile it, I have my 3 buttons. So I can actually show you different types of view. Okay, let's stay with edit view. And now what I want to do, I want to show you some more advanced rules. And we will start with editability condition. So in my hypothetical example, I am adding editability rule, which is just another property and my expression. And this will create our nice conditional statement where I want to make this editable only if the age of the user is greater than 18. So when I have this and everything's compiled, I will move into my demo. And when I'm younger, when I'm younger than 18, just like 2 years old, you see all of a sudden this bio is not editable anymore. When I'm older than 18, I can actually write my comment easily, right? The same applies that I can dynamically change content on the fly. The same, just like we had editability condition, we also have a visibility condition. So what it means is that I just use exactly the same use case. If I'm older than 18, I don't want anybody to, if I'm younger than 18, I don't want anybody to edit my screen. And if they don't edit it, why should I even bother to show it to user, right? So maybe I just want to hide it. So let me refresh. And when I'm younger than 18, now it's actually refreshed. When I'm younger than 18, the field is gone, right? Because I can apply dynamic visibility condition. And again, I'm not even touching any kinds of my TypeScript class or template class. Everything is happening within the rules. Let me go back. And of course, on enterprise level, we like to have different kinds of validation. So in my case, I want to close this one. I want to actually apply validation on the age field. And what is cool about it is that this validation will turn into Angular validators that automatically work side by side with Angular forms, where this message is translated into the error message. And when everything is okay, we return true. If not okay, we show the message. So when I actually refresh and go back, and since I'm younger, let me check. I need to probably refresh. Okay. Since I'm younger than 15, all of a sudden I see error message, right? And as I said, this is a regular Angular validator error message that show up, and I can have different error messages depending what I want. And whether I hardcode them directly into the rules or I retrieve them from some service, is really up to the application developer. Sometimes we want to show a hint or some tooltip, and maybe I don't want to really go through every single field. I just want to apply this to the single property. So I have my another rule where I just say my dynamic hint, where my bio, I just want to track number of characters that I type. And since, and I show you this in the previous slide, not only I can have string or arrays, I can have also expression. So I can actually apply this expression to also my property. So what will happen is that it will show once it actually compile and I'm able to refresh. Need to wait. Come on, you can do it. Okay. It will actually show up my hint message, right? And I don't have to do much again on template side or TypeScript side. And as I'm typing, it will nicely show dynamically how many characters I've typed so far, right? And let's move on. And I'll just show you next feature that we like to have derived fields, some fields that doesn't actually exist on the entity itself. Because what I want to do right now is that I want to create made up field, let's call it title. And I want to combine and have this title to be a value of concatenation of object name and object age. And what will happen when it will recompile, I will probably doesn't need this title anymore because I have my own. Let's check. And all of a sudden I have my title that actually corresponds to my value that looks like this. And of course, and it automatically reacts. And what is cool about those different layouts, because we don't want to have different view for create, edit, and view. And sometimes, and I already said this, is that sometimes for most of the cases, create screen is always different than the edit screen, because we want to pre-default as much as field for a user, because we know the user is creating our, let's say, purchase order, and we know everything about it, because we don't want to ask him to edit all those different fields. So what I want to have, I want to reorganize a little bit my page again. And I will actually take this rule, apply it over here. And you will see one single thing here that change. I remove those properties after that actually send those fields into different regions of the page. I have like pure declaration, and the layout, I extract it into separate file, or sorry, separate rule. And since we are additive, this is the base rule, and this rule basically override or extend the rule on top of it. And in this specific case, I have different ways how to actually send fields into different parts of the page. I can use property after, that this field is after something, or I can actually use this advanced syntax, which is for me more understandable, and I'm using this a lot, is I'm using this syntax, which I just say, hey, zone top, send their title, zone left, send their this set of fields, and send them in this specific order. So in this specific case, what I'm trying to say is, for operation, when I'm rendering a member class, then for operation edit and view, use this layout and this set of fields. But when I'm dealing with and creating objects and I have operation create, I want to show only one column layout and only those 4 fields. And when I look at this, for view, edit doesn't change. But when I just click on create, it's completely different page, right? Only 4 fields because everything is pre-defaulted. And this is how we can nicely modify our user interface depending our use case to any kinds of application, any kinds of different situation. So I will go back into my different page, go back to slides, start it. So right now, what you just saw is we just touch the surface because Meta UI by itself has 4 main concepts to deal with fields, classes. This is what we saw, but also it has concept to deal with layouts. So we can easily combine different layouts together. So I can have the same syntax, the same context, that creating context for specific user objects or object in general. And I can combine several things together and maybe combine buttons, action buttons, and forms together, right? At the same time, I can have rules that does completely different things. I can have a rule that actually use some expandable sections and place different content into different sections. Just like I can have some part of the form in one section and some other part of the form in the first section, just like you see on the picture. So we can actually stack things together. Or we can actually move this to the completely to the next level and have modules. And modules basically here represent the page. And in this specific case, modules can actually use layout, and layouts can use classes, and classes can use fields. This is basically hierarchy. But the future plan all of this, because in most of the situation, you don't want to even bother to go into rules file, because for most of the simple use cases, you want to actually stay on the domain level, on the entity object level. You want to stay with the TypeScript. So what we plan to do, and we are so close because right now we just implemented our own AST parser that actually treat these rules a little bit differently. And we have our own runtime compiler, and it will actually allow us to have those annotation on top of the fields. Or if I'm speaking TypeScript language, you can have those decorators on top of the fields. Just like in this case, I can easily assign, hey, make this field valid if something happened. Make this field a secret, which actually applies certain secret trait, and make this, let's say, field and available for typing some secret messages where the component might just show up some dots, right? And make this specific visibility condition. For the description, use straight long text, and so on, so on. So you will be able to just annotate certain fields and send them to the UI and don't care about the rest. But for those complex use cases, you can actually use the rules. And just like we use rules in CSS Vault, where completely at the bottom we have Bootstrap, right? On the top of Bootstrap, we have I don't know, some application specific rules. On the application specific rules, you can actually tweak those things for specific components. The same layering can happen as well here. So in short, that was Meta UI. Thank you so much. And I give back sharing capability to Dino.
Thank you, Frank, and thanks for presenting. Anyway, it's time for jumping to the questions from the audience. I capture one question that was written is when can you edit the rules? Is it only on the development time, or you can do it runtime, config time?
So this is good question. So up till now, and I can actually show you this. I will show you is what you haven't seen, that I have to actually run my watchdog that actually was monitoring those OSS files, those rules files, and we had up till now some old Java-based compiler that we actually use on Java-based layer, because this is coming from live Java, and that we use internally inside the company. And it was great for the offline-based rules, because you know what you are going to do, and you compile or pre-compile those rules ahead of time, and that's it. But since I finished the compiler, it will allow me not only to compile those rules during the runtime, and I will be able to create a lot of stick blitz demo so people can play with this. It will also allow us to send those metadata or rules on the fly from some web service, right? Or some RESTful service, because those fields are dynamic. And on Ariba side, at least, we are used to that we have some out-of-box base schema, and customers can keep extending it, some adding or removing, hiding fields, and we want to capture those things on the fly dynamically on the user interface as well. So offline and runtime as well.
There is another question: is the core project transient dependency of the platform? So if you want to use core, this is the package you need to import. That's the only thing. If you use platform, I guess you import platform, which under the hood will import core. Right, Frank, on the platform side?
So the thing is, when I will be integrating this with Fiori 3, and this is the thing that needs to happen, because I want to show on DCOM material design, I want to show Fiori 3 like working together. So mostly I will be importing a platform, and if I will have some components from the core, I will import core, because as I said, this rule-driven way, instantiate everything on the fly programmatically and keep adding those things to the view, right? So for me, it doesn't really matter which side I will use. It just needs to be component. And we will have basically one Fiori 3 fundamentals implementation, the integration that will try to cover most of the use cases. And we can actually keep extending it as we want.
All right. Any more questions from the audience? You can guys unmute yourself and then ask.
I have hi guys. First of all, thanks a lot for your update. I have a couple of questions about fundamental styles web page itself. I think I will share my screen and
Go ahead.
ask you. So you can see my screen right now.
Yes, we can.
Right. So the first question about the loading spinner. This is the old website where you can see two new type of spinners, and this one was deprecated. And now when I go to suggested new page, I have this one, only the option of loading spinner, which was basically deprecated at the old version. So what is the last update about this, and which loading spinner we have to use right now?
Thanks for the question. So the answer is a little short. Maybe this one, it will be changed. So what we are doing right now is, as we want to be Fiori 3 compliant, we are adopting the theming parameters from the theme designer package, right? And this happens on steps. So we are not there for the spinner. So spinner has to change, and it's gonna bring what you saw on the other website.
Okay.
But we didn't reach this component. So maybe in the next couple of weeks you can check out, and then it will be done. The other one in the fundamental website, basically, it's released in version 1.0, and it cannot be done without breaking changes, adopting the theme designer parameters. So the colors there are getting outdated, and it's difficult to migrate. So that's why here in the fundamental styles, things gonna happen, and then everything is gonna be Fiori 3, themable colors, and etc.
All right. And what would you suggest? I mean, when do you think, do you have any plans that you will have a stable version with all updated components in 1 month or 2 months? Roughly estimations do you have, or you cannot predict right now?
I understand the frustration on your side. We are now discussing how to boost and speed up the adoption of the Fiori 3. So like monitor this, our Slack space, monitor also in different channels. The updates will come very soon, as we know this is critical and it has to be addressed very soon. So let's say in a couple of weeks, I expect a lot of components to be migrated to the latest Fiori 3.
Okay, thanks a lot. And I think then my second question is kind of will be the same answer, because I found out that we had a colors page here.
Yes.
And here there is. Okay.
So maybe I can share the screen and explain why we remove the covers. It's not you're not the first one asking this question, and I'm sure you're not going to be the last. So let me precise it. So you were right. There were cover pages in fundamental. I mean, it's still there in the Fiori fundamental, but the system there, the way it was implemented, it doesn't match the theming parameters. So what we are doing is we are importing this package that it's already out there. And what they have different themes, but the one that we are interested right now is the Fiori 3. And the Fiori 3, basically they're listing the parameter names and the colors. We ask the colleagues from this team to publish also the documentation as well, as we know that developers would need a little bit more guidance. This will happen, but again, it's a different package. But we'll keep you posted about this. It's a very valid question.
Great, thanks a lot for your answer. Thank
More
you.
questions from you or other people as well?
Nothing from my side.
Oh, I see some questions. Probably it's probably for me.
Stephen, he asked a question about performance data related to applying the rules, first page load, component instantiation, etc.
So I think it's pretty fast, but I don't have any numbers. The only things I can say you that the rule engine that sits on the front end side can actually probably process like 800,000 rules per 2 seconds. At least I have this measurement when I actually run unit test, how fast it could be. It's the rule engine is really like optimized for performance to quickly evaluate and retrieve those rules. I'm not really very worried about those rendering. Here we can actually improve part as well, because what we want to use, starting Angular 8, as you know, there is this dynamic imports. And right now in Angular or in TypeScript in general, oh shit.
Drew?
Yeah, they want to kick us out. So just to finish quickly, we want to use dynamic imports to even lower the footprint, because if you want to actually dynamically instantiate component, you need to have available type, right? Otherwise, you're not able to do it. So we need to be able to import ahead of time the component we want to work with. But since dynamic imports, we can go around this and have just string and an import and let the import give us the type. So we want to change this part. But in general, it's pretty quick and fast, but there can be always room for improvements. But once we have Fiori 3 integrated, we will definitely look at some performance numbers, because more and more people will be using it, and they will be actually checking how we can actually make it faster if there will be some bottleneck.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Then there was another question: how much is the coverage of UI5 controls? So first, we are not positioning ourselves that we're going to match all the UI5 components. They have, I think, like 500 components. We're trying to target and to minimize, let's see, some fundamental components. Let's say 60, 70, 80, maybe 100, but this is maybe the most. So we are not trying to cover this as much as UI5. Any other question, guys?
So if not, I'm probably running. Otherwise,
Yeah, go out.
I will be locked in the fire.
Especially if there's fire.
Okay.
I mean, if there's no questions now, let me share one more time my screen. You can always find us in different channels. You can look in GitHub, you can look in Slack, Twitter, and YouTube. So the video is going to be published in this channel. If you have questions, yeah, you can address them anytime. Thanks for joining, and hope to have you again in maybe in 2 months, roughly.
Thank you.